Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Left Bench Podcast, the show where we can't play sports, so we talk about them instead. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day and a fantastic last couple of weeks. First and foremost, I just want to apologize for the time that I missed and for all those episodes I didn't get the chance to upload. I was out going on some senior trips with my family, out to Utah and out by the beach, and just enjoying some time with my loved ones and kind of just celebrating before I go off to college, hopefully, in September. So I appreciate all of you who are sticking around and who are excited to see the new content and have stuck with me thus far. Make sure to go ahead and follow on Instagram for those of you who are not already at the Left Bench Pod, and also make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment here. Let me know how you're liking the videos and also what I can do to improve, what I can do to make things better. I hope you guys enjoyed the last episode where we had our very first guest on the show. It was a blast. And don't forget to DM us on Instagram and let me know if you want to come on an episode. I'd love to have you. But the NFL draft has officially concluded. It's in the past. And as the teams are shaping up, there's still a lot of questions as to which teams had the best draft and the worst draft. Now, I've already covered over and over again which teams I thought were successful and which teams weren't. And so that will really shape how these teams look coming in years forward. And when you think about the offseason, the main things that you think about are the draft, are free agency, and all those things have passed. So the majority of the big things that happen in the offseason that really shape the way teams look are over. Or so we thought. Because while the big things are trades and free agency and the draft, something else that people don't realize can really affect rosters is off-season issues. The decisions that players decide to make. And today we want to talk about something that's been huge in the news and all over the media, and that's a scandal coming from two NFL players. The first being the rookie or sophomore this year cornerback DeAndre Baker, who was accused of armed robbery, as well as his partner, who was the former cornerback of the Washington Redskins, now Seahawks cornerback Quinton Dunbar. Now, honestly, this story is really crazy and surprising to me because NFL players make a ton of money. They make enough to where they shouldn't even have to worry about any kind of other job. That's why you don't see them working at grocery stores or anything like that, because they already have the ability to have all of that money. So why would anyone ever need to rob a bank? At first, you would think they wouldn't, that it wouldn't really be an issue whatsoever, and that's why it's so shocking that DeAndre Baker and Quinton Dunbar decided to go out and rob a party. Allegedly, it happened on Wednesday in Miramar, and they both turned themselves in to the police. They're suspecting of robbing guests at gunpoint at a house party. About $12,000 in cash and watches worth up to $25,000 are believed to have been taken from a property in the city of Miramar. Why? Why would you need to do this? $25,000. And when you look at the contract, even if you just look at DeAndre Baker, if you were to right now go on Google and see how much DeAndre Baker makes per year, the number is crazy considering it's related to the $25,000. They're not even on the same level whatsoever. If you look specifically at his contract, he signed a 4-year, $10,525,716 contract with the New York Giants, along with a $5,675,064 signing bonus and $9 million guaranteed. So even if DeAndre Baker quit the NFL right now, he'd be guaranteed $9 million. So why do you need to steal the $25,000? It's frankly odd to see NFL players who, after all the success they have, after all the publicity, still choose to abuse it and do things that they shouldn't. This happened a lot with Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott, and off-the-field issues are the easiest ways for NFL players to destroy their career. You would think that with the amount of training and discipline these athletes have, that they wouldn't have to worry about jail and running from the police. But so many of them do. It's frankly shocking to me. And now that DeAndre Baker is currently dealing with all these legal issues, the Giants have said to stay away from all team meetings and just focus on his legal issues. So now for the Giants, they may have lost one of their best cornerbacks. Last year he had some issues in terms of play calling, but he was drafted in the first round. He was huge for them. And now he's losing that pick. And for the Seahawks, they just made a trade for Quinton Dunbar, and now they may not even get that return either. So because of these off-the-field issues, it's really changing the way that rosters look, and we'll see how that shapes up. But that's not it for big NFL news. Something else that the NFL has proposed is a diversity suggestion. Now, when I hear diversity suggestion, I think of like the SAT and how they wanted to add some extra points for the diversity score and ensuring that everyone is equal. And I think Chargers head coach put it best by saying that sometimes you can do the wrong thing with the right intentions. And that's really what the NFL is doing. So their plan currently is to go ahead and make it so that any NFL player or any NFL team who begins to sign diverse individuals or minority will have a distinct advantage when it comes to the draft. Specifically, according to NFL.com, if a team hires a minority head coach, its third-round pick moves up 6 spots. If a team hires a minority general manager, it moves up 10 spots. And if a team hired diverse candidates for both positions, it would move up 16 spots. Additionally, a team's 4th-round selection would move up 5 spots if the coach or general manager was with said team for a 3rd year. 24 out of 32 votes are needed for it to pass. Now, I don't really get this suggestion whatsoever because I took the time to go and look up the spreads for racial issues in terms of the NFL. And if you look at the numbers, especially when it comes to the players, the majority of players are what are considered to be minorities. In fact, only 27% of NFL players as of 2019 are white. So if you look at the NFL compared to the rest of the world, the minority in the NFL are white people, whereas the majority everywhere else is considered to be whites. But then if you look at the league office, only 30% are considered to be minorities. So this is what they're basically trying to remedy. They're trying to say that, okay, we need more people as general managers of color. We need more people as owners of color. And that's their goal, is they want to even it out. But there's 2 problems here. Number 1, the incentive is pretty small to do so. So the incentive that they're putting in place, which is just moving up a couple of draft spots, isn't really going to result in a team firing their current general manager and purposely hiring someone of color to fill that gap. But either way, the bigger problem in the NFL isn't this racial split in terms of the front offices. It's actually in the CEOs and the presidents. 100% of CEOs and presidents are white. So even if you put this in place, that doesn't change the real issue. Because people like Jerry Jones, who bought the team, can't really be fired. They're the owner. So they're not going to fire themselves and hire someone of color to move up in the draft in a team that they would no longer be in control of. So really the main issue here isn't even solved by this proposal whatsoever. You have the fact that the rewards are small, and that honestly it's kind of just rooted in the wrong place. When you're hiring NFL coaches and you're hiring people in place, this is the whole problem with the whole racial equality movement, is that if a person is qualified for a position, it doesn't matter what color they are. Teams shouldn't be looking to specifically hire a minority so that they can move up in the draft. They should be looking for the best candidate possible and choose the candidate who best reflects the needs of their team, whether they're white, black, brown, doesn't matter what color, because all people are equal. There isn't a big race issue in the NFL. Just because the numbers show there's more white owners in place doesn't mean that the NFL in any way is racist or that teams are racist against those candidates. It just happens to be a coincidence that the candidates they chose are the candidates of that color. And rewarding them for choosing candidates otherwise isn't going to help with racial equality. It's actually not going to help at all. It's not going to change the status quo whatsoever. All it does is reward teams who are rebuilding and who would already be hiring new general managers and new head coaches, which is a very small minority. But at the end of the day, I don't even think it's going to pass because they need 24 votes from the NFL, from the majority of NFL teams. And I honestly don't think they're going to be able to get the numbers. Several head coaches have already spoken out about it, including very many head coaches of color already saying that it's not the right thing, such as the Chargers head coach. So while I do think this suggestion is good-hearted and it has good focus, that really in practice it shouldn't be implemented. But let's switch gears a little bit to the NBA. And it's kind of funny because if you were to look up NBA news, one of the big stories right now is that in 2021 they're changing the game ball to be Wilson brand. Yeah, shocking news. But realistically, a lot of people right now are talking about the whole Last Dance segment, talking about Michael Jordan and his show and the documentary of his life, and a lot of people are going back to old basketball. And something you'll hear a lot of people say is that the new NBA is soft, that it isn't as tough as it used to be, that players aren't as aggressive, they aren't as physical, the game is changing. Yesterday I watched a documentary that aired on ESPN that was all about the bad boy Pistons. And that's the first thing people tend to point to. They say, look at the Pistons. Look how aggressive they were. Look how much they got in people's faces and they were rough. You've got Bill Laimbeer. You have Isaiah Thomas. All these crazy people doing all these crazy things. That's how the NBA should be. Today's NBA is too soft. But But what does that really mean? Sure, the NBA has changed from then to now. And I would agree with you that if you look back 10, 20, 30 years, the NBA was way more physical than it is today. But that doesn't mean that those players are automatically better. And I hate when people make that argument. If I were to compare someone like Steph Curry to Isaiah Thomas, people would say, psh, Isaiah Thomas is tougher. Isaiah Thomas played in a harder league. Or when you look at big men like Wilt Chamberlain, people always point to when they played to determine whether or not a person is better. Sure, the NBA was more physical then. Sure, people played harder. Sure, you had teams like the Detroit Pistons who were crazy and rough and angry, but that doesn't make today's league any less talented. I would argue that, yes, while that league was more physical, today's league is more talented. Let me explain that a little bit. The best players at that time in the NBA were the big, strong guys. And of course, there were a couple of exceptions. You had people like Michael Jordan who weren't as big and as large as some of the others. But the majority of people who really excelled were the tall, really large people. But in today's NBA, there's only a couple of really, really good big men. You have Anthony Davis, Giannis, and Jokic. And Embiid, you could make the argument for. But the majority of great players, when you look at the NBA, are shooters. People like Steph Curry, people like Klay Thompson, people like Damian Lillard. You have Kyrie Irving, all sorts of great players. Even Kevin Durant. They're shooters. That's what they excel at. When you look at the greatest in history, they're not centers, they're shooters. And I would argue that the NBA becoming more quote-unquote soft, as people are saying, was good for the game. It's good for basketball today. Not only does it promote safety for the players, which is really important, but on top of that, it's made the game more fun to watch. Let me explain that a little bit. While sure, fights and big hits were fun to watch, it doesn't promote as much skill as today's basketball does. Today's basketball is about taking well-timed shots, but having good efficiency ratings, good assists overall, and just playing great with the team. It focuses on team chemistry, on having good pieces. It makes your point guards and your shooting guards matter more. Whereas then it was just get your big man in the center, pass it up to him, and just shove everybody else out of the way. Watching that Bad Boys Pistons documentary was just so interesting to me. Seeing people like Laimbeer, who their entire purpose as a player was just to get in the other team's heads. They would hit players on purpose, injure others just to get them out of the game, and it was a little infuriating to me, to be honest, to see the game being played this way. And it wasn't just the Pistons, because the teams that played against them were just as physical and just as angry. Something that people always point to is how back in that time, I even saw a comment on Instagram about it, how Scottie Pippen got injured in the middle of one of the games. And the ref just pulled him off the court, just like grabbed him by the arms and slid him off the court to get him out of the way, and the game just played on. People say, oh, you'd never see that in today's NBA. Yeah, because we care about the players. We care about their safety. We're treating it as the highest priority. Career-ending injuries are the saddest things for players, especially when they happen on purpose. So the limitations that the NBA has put in place, as well as even the NFL, are good. So anytime you hear someone say, oh, the NBA is too soft now, the NBA is more skilled. This was the natural progression of the game. Now, if they add a 4-point line, that'll get a little ridiculous, but the NBA has changed in a good way. And I'm excited to see the progression that it continues to have. Speaking of the NBA, what I want to do is rank the top 5 franchises in all of history, since we're talking about comparing the old to the new, and see what team really is the greatest if we're looking overall. So starting off with number 5. At number 5, we have none other than the bad boy Detroit Pistons. The Pistons were amazing during their own time. They played horribly. They played overly aggressive. They attacked other players, intentionally injuring others, and many teams in the league completely hated them. But you can't deny the fact that not only did they make it to 3 straight NBA finals and win 2 of them, but on top of that, they were in the playoffs consistently for a very long period of time. And when you see that they were originally in a place of rebuilding, and then came out of that stage of rebuilding to form one of the greatest franchises ever, you have to give them the credit for that. They also ended a couple of dynasties that we'll talk about later. They ended the Celtics dynasty, they ended the Lakers dynasty, they did a lot of great things in their own time. They had to play against tough teams, and they had to put a team together very quickly. They also lost a couple of players when it came to the franchise, the expansion of NBA franchises. They lost one of their key players in that too, so you have to give the Pistons credit. Even though they were rough, and even though they were rugged and a little aggressive, they were a fantastic franchise. Moving into number 4, and this one is a little controversial. I'm going to say the Golden State Warriors. When you look at the Golden State Warriors franchise, they have changed the game. The face of the NBA for the last 10-ish years, you would argue is between either LeBron James or Stephen Curry. And I would say the way Stephen Curry has played has entirely changed the landscape of the NBA. He popularized the three-point. He made it huge and he made it cool. He was so awesome to watch. Growing up, there was Kobe and then there was Curry. And everyone loved Steph. The way he played was inspiring. They were a dynasty. They won all sorts of championships. They destroyed other teams in their way. And they hold a record for the greatest regular season record of all time. That right there is a dynasty and one that deserves to be in the top 5. But now let's go ahead and move into number 3. And this is where people kind of fight me on this one. And that's the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls were a great team. Don't get me wrong. But they were absolutely carried by Michael Jordan. They've done a lot in history and they deserve to be top 3. They've won several championships over their time. But Michael Jordan was amazing. He was the best player in NBA history, by far. The only real debate is him and LeBron, and even then, it's barely even an argument. The Bills had one of the greatest teams ever that won several titles and just was dominant for the longest time. Any team who had to face them in the playoffs was instantly terrified. That's why you had people like the Pistons who had to create the Jordan rules, specifically to stop Michael Jordan. The reason why their franchise is ranked a little lower than others is just because they haven't been as consistently good throughout all of history in the same way the Warriors have not, as well as the Pistons have not. They've been good for about a 20-year stretch, and then they kind of dropped off the face of the earth like they are right now. But one team that has not ever dropped off the face of the earth is the Boston Celtics at number 2. The Boston Celtics were crazy. Larry Bird was insane. He was in the finals constantly. They won more championships than any other team in all of history. So why aren't they number 1? Well, comparatively to the Lakers have just stood the test of time. They're more marketable, they're overall more likable, and that's why they come in at number 1. Because the Los Angeles Lakers are one of the most recognizable teams in all of sports history. They're one of the best teams in terms of being able to win that you could ever talk about. They're inspirational, and they're still great to this day. And if the NBA season resumed, they'd probably win a championship. But that's all for today's episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I decided to get back into the NBA. Sorry the news was a little bit slow, but I'll be back in a couple of days with another episode, and we're going to get right back into the groove of things and dive into sports. Why? Because we may not be starters, but at least we can play left bench. Bye.